to BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast, our weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week, and what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, we are going to go over not only what happened last week, but we're going to take a look at some ball games for this week, but also taking a look ahead at possible playoff pairings that we're looking at. And these are obviously subject to change. Our projections are probably going to be way off in some instances, but we're going to take a look at what the regions look like and what we think might shake out.
Yeah, and then at this point, we're getting down to the point in district races where we're starting to get some idea kind of who's who and what's what. There are still some districts that are wide open, but I do think we are getting a little bit better picture of these districts and kind of what we're looking at here going into the postseason. So I think now is a good time to kind of take that inventory. So we'll spend some time doing that.
Before we jump into tonight's show, we need to thank our primary sponsor, Capital Farm Credit, with offices all over Texas, including Stanford and Abilene. Buy your own slice of Texas with Capital Farm Credit. Together, we're better. And with that, before we jump into the bulk of tonight's show, let's talk about what we saw last week. You were on the road for a couple of local games that did not turn out that great for the local guys.
Yeah, I went out Thursday to watch Wiley take on Wichita Falls High in Wichita Falls. In a game, I thought the Bulldogs had a really nice shot at winning and picking up a needed district win, and it turned out anything but that for the Bulldogs. They lost 41-25 in a game that really wasn't that close. Wiley got out to a nice start, had a strong kickoff return to open the game, was winning the field position battle pretty good, but only got a field goal out of their first scoring drive, and then from there, gave up 31 unanswered points, fell behind big, couldn't stop the Wichita Falls High running game, and frankly, it was just a tough performance for them. They battled back a little bit at the end, but they couldn't get any closer than the 16-point final margin. So a tough loss for them. Now they're basically in a situation where they've got to win out. They've got to beat Randall this week, Lubbock Cooper the following week, and finish with a win over Plainview to feel good about their playoff chances. There's a chance if they can beat Randall by 15 that they might have an opportunity to do something in the tiebreaker, but I don't think they can't really afford to leave it to that. So a really tough road loss for Wiley last week against Wichita Falls High, and one that really makes it very tough on them down the stretch if they want to make the playoffs. And then in Cooper's case, kind of a similar deal. They went and played a really good, really talented Fort Worth Brewer team, and kind of took it on the chin a little bit as well. They fell behind 28-0. Battled back to get it within 2 scores, but ended up falling 37-14. And it was just kind of one of the deals that Cooper's kind of struggled with all year, where they're getting off to a slow start, fall behind into a big hole, and fight back. This team fights, but they couldn't overcome that deficit. So a tough loss for them as well.
Right now, it wasn't completely empty for the local guys. Abilene did go up to Wolfforth Friendship, which is usually a pretty tough place to play. They came out there and came away with a win, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, another very impressive performance, particularly for the Abilene High offense, which has really found its stride. They had over 500 yards of offense and won that game 48-28, really controlled it from the start. They gave up an early touchdown, which was their only deficit of the game, but they answered that with 3 straight touchdowns and really never it was never really in doubt from that point forward. So a really nice win for Abilene High. Like I said, over 500 yards of offense. Abel Ramirez had a great game passing the ball, 17 of 19 for over 250 yards. And then DeKing Thomas, their standout running back, had another great game, 150 yards, 3 touchdowns, and just a really solid win for Abilene High, which is kind of following a similar path to what we saw last year, where when they hit that stride, went on a 6-game winning streak, went all the way to the 3rd round of the playoffs. This team's kind of doing something similar. They've played exceptionally well their last 4 or 5 games, and are really building momentum going into the playoffs. And I expect at this point another strong run from this bunch.
All right, the Big Country Preps game of the week took me up to Rawls for an interesting matchup between the Roscoe Plowboys and the Jackrabbits. And really, the winner of that game was going to have the inside track on the district title, and both sides knew it, and both sides showed up ready to play. We're talking about a very physical, very intense. It got chippy. I mean, there were some personal fouls. There were some unsportsmanlike conducts called. There were a lot of flags, 20 total flags between the two teams in this ball game. And Roscoe comes away with an impressive 26-14 win on the road. And 2 things about this game that I think people should take note of the fact that Roscoe faced a Rawls slot T team that has been running the ball very well and held those guys to 165 yards rushing, which is well below their average. And we're talking about a team that throws the football about once every 5 years. I mean, it's always running the football, and they're accustomed to running for 300 plus. Roscoe got real physical with them and held them down to 165 yards in rushing. And that's a great performance defensively for the Plowboys. That's something to take seriously. That's very indicative of physicality. On the other end, Roscoe rushed against them for 248 yards on 49 carries. This isn't one of those finesse Roscoe teams that we've seen in the past. This is a physical, very good defensive, sound football team. This is a team that has the ingredients that old timers like me like to see. They like to spread the field and throw the football. They still like to do that, which is fine. But when they get down in the trenches and they need to get 2 yards, you know what? They can get 2 yards on the ground. They do the things that you've got to do to potentially go a long way.
Yeah, that's the thing I like about them. And we talked about them a couple of weeks ago when we had Coach Freeman on our podcast. Was about that. It was the fact that their defense, I thought, was a little bit underrated coming into this game. You look at the way they defended some really good football teams coming into this point. I thought that was really a strength of theirs going into district play, and it definitely showed up in this Rawls game, because Rawls is a good football team. They came into that having won 5 games in a row, and Roscoe controlled them. So that's a huge win for Roscoe. They still got one more test coming up in district against Lockney, but this was a big win for them.
All right. What games surprised you most from Friday night? What games surprised you the most?
I think we have to start with not necessarily surprise, but the one that maybe stood out the most was Colorado City snapping a very long losing streak, coming from behind to beat Haskell, picking up their first win in a long time in 3 seasons. So a huge shout out to Coach Dan Gainey and that bunch. That was a gritty win for them. They found a way to win at the end, which I thought was a really good deal for those kids. Those kids have been fighting really hard this year. They've been much more competitive than they were the past 2 seasons. I thought it was really nice to see them go out and get a 28-27 win when they were down by 9 points late in that game.
What's surprising me most right now is a Ballinger team that right now is on a 2-game losing skid. Now I know that Arrett is hurt. Their starting quarterback is out, but Briley Clinton, their backup quarterback, has been playing really well. Unfortunately, Ballinger's just not winning. They've dropped 2 straight now. They've lost to a good Brady team, and then they surprisingly fell to Grape Creek last week, 20-13. And all of a sudden, Ballinger's backs are against the wall. They're 0-2 in district. They're going to have to get a win and get back into this thing. I did not see this coming.
Yeah. And
I don't know that anybody did.
No, I don't think so at all. The interesting thing there is it's probably going to come down to a matchup between Bangs and Ballinger for that 4th spot now, because Grape Creek, who we did not expect much from at all this year, is 2-0 to start district, having beaten Ballinger and Bangs. So this Grape Creek team looks like they're going to finish 3rd. I think Sonora and Brady will take 1 and 2 after Sonora topped Brady in a close game last week. So yeah, you're right. Ballinger's back is against the wall. They're going to have to win some games down the stretch, and I think that Bangs one is the one that will decide that 4th spot.
A game that we were talking about before the season ever started as being a crucial matchup for a playoff spot was Breckenridge at Early. And we expected that to be a very tight game, a very important game. As it turned out, it wasn't all that tight. Early is missing their starting quarterback. Jackson Price is still out with an injury. And Breckenridge went in there and just really dominated the game, played really well. And look at Breckenridge all of a sudden. People were down on it in that non-district schedule. And look at them. Here we go.
2-0 in district. And I think that was 2 things. I think first of all, if it had Jackson Price played that game, I think that would have been more competitive than it was. But I think at this point, you've got to give Breckenridge credit. They're playing really well. I mean, they went in, they played a struggling Clyde team to start district, but handled them like they should have. Won that game by 2 scores, and then came into this one and played really well, built a big lead and finished the game. So I think you've got to be impressed with what Breckenridge has done at this point. And now they're going to have a matchup here in a little bit with Wall for what will likely be the runner-up spot in that district behind Jim Ned. So I'm not sure coming into the season if we thought that would be the case, but this week, if Breckenridge beats Wall, they'll be playing Jim Ned for the district championship next week, which is something
Yeah.
that we did not foresee.
And Wall has got to be very worried going up there for this ball game. This is going to be a dangerous team for them to face. This is and Breckenridge traditionally, when they get it against these ground and pound physical teams, they perform really well. Just ask the guys from Brock about how troublesome Breckenridge is in these trench war games.
Ask
and Cisco.
Ask Cisco. I was about to say ask Cisco. Yeah. They took Cisco to overtime.
Absolutely, ground and pound teams. Breckenridge typically matches up well with them and gives them a very difficult time. So Wall's got to be worried about this thing going up there. This is going to be a tough one at Buckaroo Stadium.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring up, one of the most interesting districts that is evolving this year, in my opinion, from top to bottom, just very competitive. Not necessarily the best district around, but the most competitive is District 5, 3A, D2 with Eastland, with Merkel, with Dublin, Comanche's in there, Millsap, Jacksboro. From top to bottom, there's not a team in there that cannot beat another team. And we just saw evidence of that Friday night when a winless Comanche team dang near upset Eastland, falling 21-20. Dublin over Jacksboro, again, another 1-point game, 21-20. Millsap, who was a pre-district favorite by some people, struggled to get past Merkel. 25-21.
And so did Jacksboro. Jacksboro beat them by 6. So every game in that district is a one-score game.
Yes. There's not a team in that league that cannot beat another team. It's really a fascinating district to watch.
It is. And one other thing, a couple before we move on to the next section, I think one thing worth mentioning, and we kind of talked about this a week or two ago as well, about San Saba, talking about that they were due a win. They were due a big performance. They finally got it this past week against Winters, winning that one 44-12 in a game that they really dominated. I think that was kind of foreshadowed by the schedule they played. They had just barely lost to a Goldthwaite team, and now they got a chance to put a little winning streak together going because they've got a struggling De Leon team this week. So they're another one of those that we've kind of been keeping our eye on. When you play that difficult to schedule and kind of show some signs of life, I think at some point it will pay off, and I think we saw that with them this week.
All right. Now, who can say I told you so this week? Who can say I told you so?
Probably you if you're bringing it up.
No, actually both of us can. I guess, sort of. But I did warn people. Now, I didn't pick them to win, but I knew that Monaghan's was going to have a hard time up at Snyder, and I said so. I'm on record. I'm on tape saying that, folks.
Yeah, you are.
Monaghan's got beat by Snyder. What a performance! And really, I knew that they would, if they won that game, they'd be just lucky to get out of it with a win because Snyder was going to want that game more than they did, and that's what I said, and they did. Snyder was trying to avoid an 0-2 start. And when you're 0-1 and you're bringing a team in that's coming off a big win and you're at home, that's a really tough position for the favorite to come in. And Snyder knocked them off. That is a sound team. And actually, that's a pretty good district as well. Yeah. That's another district that, almost anything can happen.
Yeah, what was interesting about that game was it was really a tale of two halves. Snyder got off to a great start, built a 28-0 halftime lead, and then white-knuckled it the rest of the way. But they made a big stop at the end to secure that victory, which was huge because at that point, Monaghan's had all the momentum. Monaghan's outgained them pretty good, but Snyder, like you said, they got off to the great start and were able to finish it. A huge win for them. And in that same district, I think we got to start looking at the job that Coach Russell Lucas is doing in Sweetwater as well. They got off to a very rough start against a tough schedule. They're playing really well now, particularly on the offensive side of the football, where they've really found their stride. They scored 34 points in a 34-28 win over a good defensive Midland Greenwood team. Greenwood struggled offensively, but that's a good defensive team. And Sweetwater continued to put up points and put up yards. And if you look, all of a sudden, that team is undefeated in district with a game against a Pecos team that they'll be favored relatively comfortably against, which means we're probably going to get a Sweetwater Monaghan's game there at the end of the season with a chance for them to clinch a district championship, which I predicted and was not feeling great about after about 4 games. So pretty cool to see what they're doing out there.
All right. Now I think you can say I told you so with Forsan over Anson, but for a half, that was in doubt. And I did say that the issue would be down going in the second half, but Forsan did end up winning comfortably 50-27, a 3-score win. I really believed that the Tigers were going to be within 2 scores in that final. It did not work out that way. And
No,
actually, it was this game that scared me more than anything for Forsan to go on the road facing Anson on that the foreign surface, that grass field that they've got, which is just a different surface than what you're accustomed to facing or seeing. I really was worried for the Buffaloes going into that place, and for a half, the issue was very in doubt. Anson brought it; they really did.
Yeah, that's what was really interesting about it is that Forsan took Anson's best punch. Anson came out, got out to a 2-score lead, was playing really well, and Forsan was able to absorb that and then go on their run and do what they did. But that's the thing I really like about this team. It's a very resilient football team.
Yes.
You're starting to see that. They struggled for a half against Colorado City in the week prior, and then outscored the Wolves 20-0 in the second half to win that one comfortably. So you're starting to see a team that plays really well in the second half of football games, which I think will bode well for them. And it all kind of comes down to what we've talked about all year. They've got that matchup looming at the end of the season against Hawley. The question is, are they on that level? We're going to find out. But I really like the way this Forsan team plays. Very physical and a very tough-minded football team.
Forsan still has a road game at Stanford that they cannot overlook. Anytime you go in on the road, you have to take care of business.
Definitely.
If they take care of business and they play the way they're supposed to be playing, I do believe that we will see a couple of 9-0 teams matching up in November when Hawley goes out to Forsan, which will be one of the biggest games, regular season games that Forsan has ever had, if not the biggest. It's certainly the biggest in recent memory.
And just one last game I'll bring up that I wasn't terribly surprised necessarily by the outcome, but I do think it kind of tells you the quality of the team we're talking about here is Santos 42-7 win over Cross Plains. I think that this Santo team's playing really, really well right now. They're running their offense and defense about as well as they can be right now. And Cross Plains is reeling a little bit to start district. They obviously lost to Heiko the week before, but Santo, if you look at the way their schedule's shaking up, it looks like they're going to take a lot of momentum into that Albany matchup, and that's going to be a fun one to watch.
Cross Plains has a lot of youth offensively. They've got a freshman quarterback, and it's a learning process. When you've got a freshman quarterback, it's a process. Yeah. It's not one of these, snap your fingers and we're a success thing. You just have to grow. And right now, they're going to grow. That's the position that they're in.
Yeah, I agree.
So they still have I still think you'll see Cross Plains in postseason play, but they've got some growing to do. That's about the only way to put it. They're just in one of those phases, and every program goes through a phase like this.
Yeah, but the thing I like about the Santo team is they're really executing what they do very well, regardless of the opponent at this stage. I think that's a good sign when you're talking about the triple option team in particular. They're really executing at a high level. They've kind of figured out the ball control issues they had last year. They're playing great defense on top of it, and again, it's kind of like Forsan. I don't know if they can, if they're ready to step on the field with Albany and beat them, but I'm excited to see how that turns out.
Two matchups I want to bring up. We've already brought up one for this week. Our Big Country Preps. Well, before we talk about the Big Country Preps game of the week, I think one of the big games to watch out for is this Wall at Breckenridge game. That's going to be a big matchup. We've already talked about that. It's going to be tough for Wall. It's going to be tough. But our Big Country Preps game of the week is a game that we've been looking forward to for a while. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Coleman is going to be playing host to the Cisco Lobos. And we've got 6-1 against 6-0. We've got physicality against speed. It's going to be a great matchup. And we know Coach Johnny Elder's always got something up his sleeve for Cisco. He's given them problems in the past. I look forward to the matchup. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we've been talking about these matchups all season long, there are 4 or 5 that I've kind of looked at as kind of ones that I've been excited about all year. I think one of those was Snyder against Jim Ned. I wanted to see how Snyder would handle that type of challenge. Early Jim Ned was another one, and unfortunately Early got beat up on in that one. But then after that, it's 2 we just talked about. The one this week with Coleman and Cisco. I'm excited to see how this Coleman team stacks up against what we know is a very, very good Cisco team. And then obviously the Forsan Holly match there at the end. So this is one of those matchups that I think like you and I have both had circled on our calendar for a long time. I really like this Coleman team. You look at what they're doing on both sides of the football, very impressive. and I'm excited to see just kind of how they do now that they're going to be tested against an elite football team. I think we can call Cisco that. Cisco is a very, very good football team.
Yes.
Young quarterback in Jaden Jackson has played great this year. They've got some really good athletes on the edge. When you talk about guys like Devin R. Robinson, Braxton Smith's one of the area's most explosive receivers. Rylan Gentry's a really good two-way player. This Coleman team's got a lot of athletes, but they have not faced this type of test yet this season. So I'm excited to see how they handle that, particularly at home in a game that's probably the biggest. This is the biggest. Let's face it. This is the biggest game Coleman's played in years. I mean,
yes, it is. Time. Yes, this is huge. This is a big one. I think the key matchups are Cisco's. Can Cisco contend and contain Coleman's speed, and can Coleman match up with Cisco on the interior?
Yeah, and what's going to be fun is this Coleman defense. And granted, the schedule they played, I mean, it hasn't been a great schedule. They've allowed 25 points all year long. I mean, that is pretty remarkable.
Yes. This is the measuring stick. This is by far the best team that Coleman has played. Is it the best team Cisco's played? We'll see. But I'll tell you what, Coleman's going to have to be pretty good to be the best team that Cisco's played thus far. Cisco's schedule was absolutely loaded. As we know, including a matchup with Jim Ned, which they nearly won. So we shall see. But it's an interesting matchup for sure. And Hubbard Field's never an easy place to play.
Yeah, and I think it's a good test for both teams. I think this is one both teams need as they get ready for the playoffs, particularly as they match up with District 3-2A Division 1 on the other side. I think you want to have this type of test going into that because, I mean, all the playoff teams out of those two districts are going to be quality teams.
All right. And with that, before we jump into a quick look at possible playoff matchups here in the near future, we want to thank our sponsors. Obviously, first and foremost, Capital Farm Credit, who brings you these Wednesday night podcasts every Wednesday night throughout the school year. Also, for the love of the game broadcasting, our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of KLAX 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, KATX 97.7 FM out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM, KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Brecken, KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is for the love of the game broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge, one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. If you are in the market, give Rob a call at 254-559-2266. That's Rob Durham up at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge. And finally, Phil Hill of the Abilene Realtors Group, big supporter of local athletics. If you are in the market, give him a shout at 325-669-5153 or visit his website at philhillproperties.com. And with that, Mr. Youngblood, we got playoffs coming. It's probably a little bit early to be bringing them up, but it's fun. It's fun to maybe speculate about some of the possible matchups that we might be looking at. And some of the matchups we might be facing involve some really good teams from our area, and we might end up losing some teams early because, hey, it's one of ours against one of ours, and it's just the way it is. And that's traditionally the way it is every year because of geography. We end up getting a good football team bumped off, in round one or round two, where if we could possibly seed the entire region, these things would not be happening. But I guess that's just too good of an idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like the idea.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot.
It may not be practical, especially if you're talking about, the bigger classifications when, you might have to have a first round matchup with an El Paso team against a Metroplex team. And that I understand that's not practical. But man, if we could seed the regions. Yeah. That'd be so much better.
And it seems like we talk about this every year, but you do hate to see a really good football team, end up playing another really good football team in the second or third round. And frankly, that's what we're going to be looking at again in 3A D1, where you've got the top two teams in the state, according to the rankings, and Jim Ned and Brock set for a collision course in the third round. I mean, these are probably the two best teams, not only in that region, but maybe in the entire state in that classification. And one of them will be out in the region quarterfinals.
Yeah. That's one example, and that's likely going to happen. But let's we're jumping the gun a little bit on 3A. Let's start at Class 2A, Division 2, and then we'll work our way up. interesting matchups early on. We know how good Albany is, but it is more than likely the way it's shaken out. If Albany wins their district as we expect them to, and Munster wins their district as we expect them to, we're looking at a matchup between probably a couple of unbeaten teams, Dan. Just 2 rounds in, Albany against Munster is a very strong possibility.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge one that you're looking at there as a third round matchup. And then and one thing that's interesting is, like we just talked about, in the second round, you look at the top half of that bracket, we're looking at a likely matchup between Roscoe and Santo as a second round matchup. Two teams that are, really playing good football. Both could go into the playoffs, around 9-1 or so.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to meet in the second round. So that's kind of what we talk about. But yeah, the Munster Albany one, I think on a statewide level is one you look at as being, just one of those matchups that's a huge matchup. And then you likely get the winner of that against Windthorst the following week. So
yes.
So I think that bracket looks pretty interesting. I think we've got 3 teams in there with a chance, to get to the third round or deeper, in my opinion. You look at Roscoe, Santo. I think both those teams have that opportunity. Albany, I think we're all expecting to do that. But when you look at Albany's path, I think that their path is brutal.
Well, in one sense, the Roscoe Santo matchup in the second round is actually good for us if it does occur, because it guarantees one of our teams will see a regional semi. That's but you hate to lose a good team that early. But Santo, if they finish second, they're more than likely, at least right now, it looks like they'll probably get a Petrolia team that is pretty stout in the first round. So, I mean, if things shake out the way we think and Roscoe wins their district, they should get a very winnable game against Quanah and advance. But Santo's going to have a tough go. They're going to have a Petrolia team that's playing really well right now in the first round. So we'll see. If they finish second to Albany, they're going to have a tougher matchup. So
the other good thing about a potential Roscoe Santo matchup is you're looking at geographically maybe ending somewhere up like Cisco or somewhere very, very not far from us. That would be a very fun second round matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be a fun. It's more of a contrast in styles type deal. Although I will say this, even though Roscoe spreads the field, that's a physical football team and they play well defensively. Yeah. And they just absolutely shut down a slot T team Friday night. So that would be a challenge for Santo, as well as they're playing offensively, even though they run that flex bone really well.
Yeah.
Roscoe's defense will be a challenge if they do happen to meet up there in that second round.
Yeah, that would be a fun matchup. And then obviously, I mean, with Albany, once you get to the third, fourth round, you're expecting to face tough teams. So we've always known that in that region, you've got Munster, you've got Windthorst, you've got Albany as state powers.
Got Wellington too. Well, Wellington's in Region 1, but those regions are going to hook up.
Yeah, I mean, to get out of there, you're going to have to beat a Stratford or a Wellington or somebody like that, a McCamey. It's a tough go, but that you expect it to be if you're trying to play for a trip to state.
All right, let's move up to Class 2A Division 1, Dan. Region 1, I think it looks pretty good for the Big Country in this region. I think we've got 3 pretty good shots at getting to take a regional championship. We got 3 pretty good teams that have a shot at winning it. Coleman is in there. Holly is in there. Cisco is in there. These are 3 teams that have the potential to win that region.
And I throw in a fourth
threat, at least on paper. Well, and the Forsand's in there also. Yeah. Let's not forget them. Yeah. But there are some threats out there. New Deal being the biggest one. And if it shakes out the way it, at least on paper, looks like it might, Forsand, unless they beat Holly at home to close the season out, would probably get New Deal in the second round. So they're going to have a big challenge. That's just assuming they don't get past Holly, which they're capable of doing.
Yeah, and in looking at it, I think Forsand's probably the dark horse of our 4 biggies in that region. I think that Coleman, Holly, Cisco probably are the favorites if we're going to get a team out of that region. But I do think that Forsand, especially if they can beat Holly, all bets are off. I mean, at that point, I think that their path becomes a little more favorable because they won't catch New Deal in the second round. So
Sure.
But I think if this is one of my favorite regions, looking at the playoffs of any of ours in the big country, because we've got four teams that are very, very good. I think
Yes.
that there's a good chance that when we get to the region semifinals, 3 of the 4 teams will be ours, and that's pretty exciting.
If we get out of the region, and I think we've got 4 shots of doing that, but if we get out of the region, looming on the horizon to be a very good Crawford team as the final hurdle to sending one of our teams to Arlington in this classification. That's the New Deal team worries me, and that's actually that really shows how important that game between Hawley and Forsan is, because the loser of that game is more than likely going to get stuck with New Deal in the second round of the playoffs. So,
and then the winner.
Really, go ahead.
Sorry, the winner's looking at a matchup with Cisco in the region semifinals. So you're either way. You've got a tough go, but it's I think you'd rather extend if your goal is to extend that run, you'd rather not face New Deal in the second round. So, but one thing that I think is interesting, you talked about Crawford waiting in that region 2 bracket, and there aren't a whole lot of data points by which to judge our teams against that Crawford team. But one that I think that we do have is the fact that both Crawford and Coleman have played Goldthwaite. And honestly, Goldthwaite gave Crawford a better go than they gave Coleman. So I think, I don't know, obviously transitive property rarely works in football, but it gives you some guide anyway that Coleman may be pretty darn good. I think we think they are, and they're going to get the chance once they get to the playoffs to prove it.
One thing that I think might hurt Crawford is I don't believe their region overall is as strong as ours. I think there's a lot of teams that are their top teams are maybe a couple scores weaker than ours. And so, I mean, Crawford would be facing probably their biggest test once they get to that point, regardless of who they face. I don't think they face anybody on that level, at least.
The one good thing, if you're going to be in that situation, the one good thing for Crawford is that they're one of those programs that's accustomed to being in that situation. So at least they may not be as battle tested this year, but they've got that experience from the past they can lean on. So they're going to be a test for whoever gets out of Region 1, assuming they do in Region 2. But it's going to be fun to see how our teams stack up and how that region plays out, because our teams will play a major role in deciding how that region shakes out.
All right, let's jump up to Class 3A, Division 2. I'll be honest, I don't like our chances, and I'll just be blunt. This region is absolutely loaded, and so I mean, I'm just talking about our chances of sending somebody to state. So you look at Region 1 and you look at Region 2. It's an absolute minefield on that side of the state bracket. In our region, in Region 2, there's Holiday is in there. Gunter is in there. Gunter, which will likely be undefeated and probably the favorite to go all the way to state, is in there. And if you escape that, then I mean, on the other side of the bracket, there's Abernathy, there's Lubbock Roosevelt, there's Childress, there's Canadian. I mean, there's Idalou. To get out of that side of the bracket, you're going to be facing somebody monstrous every week. And our teams at that level, they're good. We've got some good ball clubs. Brady's in there. Eastland's in there. Dublin's in there. But they're still not the vintage teams of those programs that you would probably need to get out of this region and beat whoever comes out of Region 1.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Region 1 is absolutely brutal. You look at the teams in that region with Idalou, Canadian, Childress, Abernathy. There are some real monsters in that region. So whoever, it makes the playoffs of our teams in that region, you're looking at probably Brady, probably Ballinger as a 4 seed. They're going to have a really tough go. And then Region 2, while not probably quite as strong, they've still got, like you said, Holiday is really, really good. Henrietta is a team that's kind of a dark horse. They've played much better than I probably expected them to this year. And then Gunter, I think Holiday and Gunter are kind of the 2 biggies that are waiting for our Region 2 teams. And frankly, our Region 2 teams
might be the best team in the state at that level. They might be the best team in the state. They are clearly, I think they're going to be the regional favorite. But whoever comes out of Region 1 is going to have a hard time with Gunter.
Yeah, I agree. I think Region 2, I think Gunter's the best team probably in that whole pod, but I think Region 1 has
top to
more
bottom.
high quality. It has better depth, but I think Gunter's probably the best of the.
I agree with you on that.
And I think a potential Holiday Gunter region championship match would be really interesting because obviously the Holiday team's very good as well, as some of our teams have learned. But I think for this season, when you look at our teams in that bracket or those two brackets in Region 1, Region 2, I think any of those would be happy getting a playoff win. If Brady, if Dublin, if Ballinger's now going to have a tough go now because they're looking at probably a 4 seed if they get in. I think Eastland's another one of those. If they can get a playoff win, I think that it's a really successful season for them. And then if they can maybe see what happens after that. But in this bracket, like you said, these teams are just they're not quite on the level of maybe some of the others they would be facing, particularly once you get to the third or fourth round in these regions.
All right, let's jump up to Class 3A, Division 1. The elephant in the room. Okay, now we can talk about first round matchups if we want to, but the elephant in the room is going to be Jim Ned against Brock, and that's going to occur if everybody takes care of business. It's probably going to occur 2 rounds down the line in the regional semis. In Region 1, it looks like they're going to hook up at that point. And man, I'll tell you what, that's going to be every bit as uncertain as it was last year. Let's remember, Jim Ned went in as the big underdog, and the question was, can they compete? But they did everything they had to do to compete with Brock and win that day.
Yeah.
This year, they might go in by that time. They might go in as a slight favorite. It's possible by then. But it's totally uncertain. When those two teams hook up, it's going to be completely uncertain.
Yeah, and if you look at how close those two are in the computer rankings, I mean, they're within a point of each other. So even the computers don't know kind of how they feel about that matchup as well. So these are two teams that are very, very good. There's a reason that these two teams are ranked number 1 and number 2 in the state. Both tested themselves, in both in district and non-district. So I think you're going to have another really fun matchup looming. I wish it was not in the third round. I wish it was 1 round later, and that they were playing for the region championship. But in any event, I mean, this matchup's coming one round or another. If those teams take care of business, I think that on paper those are the 2 best teams in this region by a good margin. And if they take care of business, it's going to be fun to watch. And then you look at a couple of other matchups that could be interesting. I think you look at a potential Breckenridge Pilot Point matchup as a 2-3 matchup. That one I think could be more interesting than a lot of people expect it to be. I think Breckenridge is a little underrated right now based on their record. I think that if you look at the schedule they played and the way they're playing now, I think that's going to be a tough team once the playoffs start. And then the other kind of wild card is Wall. Wall's always a wild card. If they, depending on whether they finish second or third, they're probably going to be facing either a Pilot Point or Whitesboro. I don't think that's an unwinnable game at all for that Wall team. So it's going to be interesting. I think that this region's always fun. When you look at the 2 districts that we cover, 3-3A and 4-3A, those are always very tough districts, generally play a major role in kind of deciding how that region shakes out. And I think this year will be no different.
If Wall beats Breckenridge on the road, they'll get probably Whitesboro in the first round. But that's what really that game's going to determine. The Wall Pilot, it doesn't, whether it's Whitesboro or Pilot Point in the first round, it's still going to be a difficult matchup. It's going to be a difficult go. And the loss to Breckenridge for early did not help the Longhorns' cause. I think they'll snag that 4 seed, but chances are it looks like it's going to be Brock in the first round again. The Longhorns, now that they have lost to Breckenridge. And
in the one wild card in District 4-3A that not a lot of people are talking about yet that could be interesting is a Peaster team that has yet to lose a district game. They've played the weaker teams out of that district to start, but they've played well all year. Peaster's going to be interesting, and they'll probably be fighting with Paradise for that 4th spot. So whether it's Peaster or Paradise, will be interesting, but Peaster still got a chance to play the better teams of that district. They've got a chance to really shock some people if they can, beat a Pilot Point or beat a Whitesboro.
There's another team that could sneak into the playoffs that nobody's talking about right now, but with early struggling, we could see the Clyde Bulldogs sneak in there and snag that 4 seed. That's possible.
That's true. And Clyde just got their first win last week against TLCA. They played relatively well against Breckenridge. They kind of kept that one within a 2-score margin for most of that game. So yeah, if Early continues to have injury issues, continues to struggle, that becomes a really big game for both teams.
All right, now we're going to move up to Class 4A, D2, Region 1. Dan, I'll be honest, as fun as Snyder and Sweetwater have been to watch this year, they're going to have a minefield in that region. And one of the biggest hurdles out there is going to be Salina. Aubrey is going to be in there also. Lubbock Estacado's in there. It's just going to be very difficult to get out of this region, especially with Salina in it.
Yeah, to me, Salina is the big one. But I think Salina and Aubrey to me are the two teams in this district that or in this region rather that are a good ways above the rest. I think that our teams, if they continue to progress, I think that they can compete with the Lubbock Estacado. I think they can compete with an Iowa Park. I think they can compete with a Graham. But the problem is, at the end of the day, you're going to have to at one point either beat a Salina or beat a Aubrey if you want to get out of the district, out of the region, maybe both, and that's where it gets really, really difficult. So, I think it's going to be interesting. I think that the one really interesting thing about our district there in D2 is that at this stage, you really can't forecast seeding at all because you've got Sweetwater's undefeated right now, but they've got a game coming up against Monahans. Monahans lost that game to Snyder, but Snyder lost to Sweetwater.
Yeah,
it could go any number of ways at this point.
Sure.
So it's hard to know who's going to be playing where in that region. But I think the big thing is that regardless, you're going to have tough matchups in Region 2 or in Round 2, but not necessarily unwinnable ones because there you would be facing teams like Graham, like Estacado. Those that caliber of team. And then once you get to region or round 3 and beyond, then you're talking about really facing the biggies. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I like the way that Snyder and Sweetwater are playing going into the playoffs, but I tend to think that that there is a ceiling on what they can accomplish just because of those two that are waiting for them there at the end in that region.
All right, now we're going to jump up to Division 1, Class 4A. Now we're going to have two regions that we're talking about here, Region 1 and Region 2. We've got teams in both. We'll start off in Region 1, where the Big Spring Steers, if they take that number 2 seed, if they end up at number 2, it looks like probably Clint in the first round, and that's a very, very winnable game for the Steers. After that, they could be tangling with somebody like Lake Worth, who's pretty stout at this point, and that'd be a tough second round matchup. It'd be a tough road, and then the rest of that region. There's some nasty teams in there. There's going to be Canyons in there. Obviously, you'd have to get past Andrews again. They're in there. It's a tough road. And Hershey's in there also.
Yeah, I mean, quality teams from Hershey, from Decatur. That's a tough region. The one thing I like about that region for Big Spring is that you can win a game or two in that region if you finish with the seeding that you like, particularly if they can get that number 2 seed and get Clint. They've won the first round before with lesser teams than this one. So I think that if they can get into the playoffs with a 2 or even 3 seed, I think they've got a good opportunity to win that first round. It's from that point that things get a little tougher. If they do finish in third in that district, for instance, behind Andrews and Fort Stockton, they're likely facing a really good Lake Worth team in the second round, which would be a challenge. So I think it would be in their best interest to try to finish above third. But I think this Big Spring team, when you look at that region, has a good opportunity to win a playoff game, and then we'll see what happens from there. And then you go down to Region 2, and Region 2 we've talked about a ton. That is a stacked region, starting with our district with 5-4A, where you've got 3 state contenders in Stephenville, Waco, La Vega, and Midlothian Heritage. And then after that, once you get out of that district, then you're talking about, excellent teams from Argyle and Melissa. So I still think Stephenville, in my opinion, is the best team in that region. I honestly think that as good as that region is, I think Stephenville is the best team there. I think Melissa would be their biggest challenge, but until somebody beats Stephenville, I'm going with the Yellow Jackets. I love the way the team's playing on both sides of the football.
It's going to get very tough fairly early for Stephenville, as good as they are. After a couple of rounds, I think the first two ball games, more than likely they're going to get Eastern Hills, would they'd be a big favorite if they move on, possibly facing maybe Anna or somebody like that, and they'd be a big favorite there. But beyond that point, you're going to be looking at if you want to advance just to get out of the region. Beyond that point, you're probably going to get an Argyle and then a Melissa if things shake out the way we expect. Melissa in a regional championship game. But still in the mix, La Vega is still going to be in there. There's never any guarantees against them. And then Heritage is going to be in there. It's a minefield just to get out of the region. And if they do that, if they get out of the region, possibly Decatur, possibly Lake Worth, that could be the situation if they get that far to a state semifinal. Is Stephenville good enough to get to a state semifinal? Absolutely. They're good enough to go all the way to Arlington, in my opinion. But once they get to that that state final or that state semifinal, it's probably going to be Decatur. I don't know if the other side of the bracket though is as strong as our side of the bracket. I don't think so overall.
I think Region 2 is quite a bit better than Region 1. But my thing with Stephenville that I really am excited about for them is that while yes, they're going to face a test week after week once you get to about the third round of the playoffs, they've been playing that level of competition. By then, they'll have been playing that level of competition really all season. They stack their non-district schedule, and then in district, when you play games against both La Vega and Heritage, you're not going to see anything in the playoffs that's significantly better than what you've seen to that point. So I think that they're going to go into the playoffs well, battle tested. They're going to go into the playoff season if they can stay healthy. I think that to me that they have a little bit of an edge on some of the teams that they're going in there. I think this Argyle team, while still very good, I don't think it's quite as good as the Eagles have been in past seasons. I think they're kind of a similar situation as La Vega. They're still very good. You still have to account for them, and they could be a team that by the time the playoffs roll around, flip that switch and they're playing, state championship caliber football. But I don't think what we've seen from them to this point is quite what we've seen from them in the past. So I think that if Stephenville can get on that top half of the bracket, I honestly think they can get through Argyle, which puts you probably in a region final matchup with Melissa, and that would be a really, really good game.
All right, we're going to jump up to Class 5A Division II. We have one team and one team only in that classification, the Wiley Bulldogs. Dan, they've got the work cut out for them. Can they get in your opinion? And if so, who do you think they're going to be facing in the first round?
Yeah, I mean, can they get in? That is the question. I think they can. I think they've shown at different times this season that they have that ability, but they've put themselves in a really big hole where the playoffs started for Wiley this week. I mean, they're in basically a win or be done situation starting this week with Canyon Randall coming to town. And then the big test they've got is going to, Randall's a big enough test. Randall's playing well this year, but and then the bigger test comes after the week after that when you've got Lubbock Cooper coming to town, and Lubbock Cooper's obviously the favorite in that district. But Wiley's basically put itself in a situation where they need to win out or need to beat Randall by 15 and have some good things happen, or have Plainview upset Wichita Falls High, which is possible but unlikely. So if Wiley makes the playoffs, ironically, we're talking about they make the playoffs. If they make it, they're probably going to have to make it as a 3 seed, because that would mean they've won out. Because if they don't win out, they're probably going to lose a tiebreaker and end up 5th. So it's a really tough situation they put themselves in. So at this point, I think they're like I said, their playoffs start this week. They're in a playoff situation now.
All right, and with that, we're going to jump up to Class 5A Division 1. Again, we have one team and one team only in that classification out of the Big Country. That is going to be Abilene Cooper. It's nice not to be the 4th seed, but I'll tell you what, anything coming out of District 4 that you face is going to be a stout competition. It's going to be stout competition. But if you're the 4th seed, you're going to get stuck with a very good team from Heritage. So Cooper's going to be trying to get that 3 seed and lessen the pressure a little bit.
Yeah, and as Cooper learned last year, that district they're matched up with out of the Metroplex is very good. Last year, Cooper had a really good district championship football team and lost in the first round to a Mansfield Summit team that probably underachieved some in district to finish 4th, but very talented. And I think that's kind of the case with all those teams. You look at even the district champion out of Cooper's district will likely be facing a Richland team that's pretty stout, coached by Will Cates' brother, the Merkel football coach. His brother, one of his 2 brothers who coach in the state, is at Richland, and that's a good football team. But the way Cooper's looking at it, they're probably their ceiling, I think, at this point is 3rd, because they've already lost a couple of district games to Justin Northwest and Fort Worth Brewer. So they're going to have to go on the road to beat Azle, which is a really good football team, probably to avoid that 4 seed and to earn probably a playoff rematch with Summit most likely. So Cooper's in a tough spot, but it'll be interesting. This is kind of a young Cooper team, a growing Cooper team. one that's probably not quite as strong as some they've had in past years. But the thing I like about this Cooper team is it's very resilient. This team battles. They tend to dig themselves holes, but they generally fight really hard once they're in that position to try to get themselves back into games. Can they get Azle on the road to avoid a 4 seed? I'm not sure. And if they get in the 4 seed, I mean, can they compete with Colleyville Heritage? Again, I'm not sure, but this team will battle. This team will fight. And that I think we can pretty well guarantee because we've seen them do that all year.
All right. And with that, we're going to jump up to Class 6A Division II, where the Abilene Eagles are the lone wolf from the big country in this classification. And at least on paper, Dan, the way the pairings may shake out, the path is there. The possibility is there for a deep run. I mean, it's not impossible. It's going to be a tough game every step for Abilene, but it's not unwinnable. Every step, they could go beyond 3 rounds deep. It's possible.
Yeah. And we saw this last year where they took a team, they got off to a slow start. I think they lost 3 of their first 4 games. Were really struggling out of the gate, hit their stride, started winning, and all of a sudden, by the time they get to the playoffs, they were a tough out. And I think we're seeing that now. I think the one game that really kind of opened some eyes. Well, first of all, you go on the road and you beat Odessa Permian the way they did. I think that was the first one that kind of opened some eyes and said, hey, this Abilene team's pretty good. But they followed that up with a really strong performance against a Midland Legacy team that's outstanding. That's one of the best offensive teams in the state at any classification. And Abilene High led that game in the second half. So I think that this Abilene High team definitely has that capability. And they've got a really light schedule down the stretch where they can really build some momentum going into the playoffs. They should take a winning streak into the playoffs. And then they match up with an El Paso district in the first round. So you would think they would probably have a good shot at winning that one. And then from there, it's whatever happens. I think you're right. I think that they're going to get the 1 seed in the small school division in 6A because 6A is still the one classification that splits after the season. So Legacy will take the number 1 seed in big school. Abilene High will likely take the number 1 seed in small school. And then you've got a pathway, I think, like you said, to the 3rd or 4th round. You're probably looking at matchups maybe with a Northwest Eaton in the 2nd round and then a Denton school in the 3rd round. Generally speaking, they're going to be facing that Denton district then. But last year it was Geyer. And had Abel Ramirez stayed healthy, they might have had a shot to beat Geyer last year. I think without a quarterback, they had to play a receiver at quarterback who did an admirable job, but it was not a quarterback. So there was a challenge for them. They still took that game into the 4th quarter with an opportunity to win it. So I like this Abilene High team. It's gritty. It's taken on the kind of the image of its coach and Mike Fullen. They're gritty. They believe they're kind of that blue collar team that's just going to fight and scrap. And I think once you get to the playoffs, that's a really good quality to have. They're going to be a tough out for whoever plays them.
Be tough, but you know what? It's an equal chance of a quick exit also because of the difficulty along the way. It's just going to be. It's almost right now. It almost looks like coin flips every round for them. So, but the chance is there for a deep run. There's no. And I think
the one thing with Abilene High that I think is always kind of the X factor is I do think matchups do apply somewhat to them because this Abilene High team over the years, even before when Mike Fullen was the defensive coordinator and now he's obviously the head coach, this Abilene High team, if against predominantly run teams, they are very, very stout defensively. They struggle a little more with pass happy teams, but this year they've done a pretty good job against those as well. The one thing I like about this Abilene High team is this year's team, maybe more so than any in the recent past, probably back to 2016, has the ability to win a shootout if they need to. This offense is really playing well. So they can outscore you too. That's one thing I like about this team is if in the right matchup they can shut you down, and then and if they need to, they can score with you as well. So I'm excited to see how this team does. I like the way things are shaping up. I like the momentum they're building going into the postseason. And while I think you're right, it is a lot of kind of coin flip matchups. I think that this team is well equipped and really in a good position in those situations.
And with that, it's just about time to wrap up the Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you that we have 3 separate subscription packages here at BigCountryPreps.com. We've got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription where we knock that price down to $4 a month. And we've got an annual, a 12-month subscription where we knock the price down to $3 a month. And that's 12 months, $36 for a full year of Big Country High School athletic coverage.
We'd also like to remind you that if you see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, those are available for purchase. You can purchase a digital download for just $7. And we also have prints and keepsakes available. So make sure you check those out. As you're scrolling through the site, you'll notice we take a lot of photos from these games we're at. That's something we really enjoy doing, and it's something we're proud of here at bigcountrypreps.com.
All big country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.